The station floated in the quiet between stars, wrapped in layers of light and metal that reflected distant suns like scattered memories. It was called a neutral place, built by many species and owned by none. From the outside it looked calm, almost gentle, but inside it carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken rules. Jonah Hale stood near one of the wide observation panels, his hands folded behind his back the way he did when he was thinking too much. Beyond the glass, space stretched endlessly, dark and bright at the same time. He had seen this view many times before, yet it never stopped pulling at him. There was always something new to notice, a pattern he had not seen, a question forming before he could stop it. He reminded himself to breathe and to look relaxed. Humans were still new here. Too much excitement made the others nervous. Around him, the chamber hummed softly. Light shifted across the walls in colors chosen to be acceptable to as many species as possible. Representatives from half a dozen worlds moved slowly through the space, their forms strange but familiar now. Some floated, some walked, some glided as if the floor were only a suggestion. Jonah had studied all of them, not just their biology, but their habits, their pauses, the way their attention drifted. That was his job officially. Human cognitive analyst. Unofficially, he was here because humans notice things they were not supposed to. "Still watching the stars?" a voice asked behind him. Jonah turned. She stood closer than he expected, too close for comfort by most species' standards. Her form was tall and slender, her features smooth and symmetrical in a way that made it hard to guess her age. Her eyes, dark and reflective, seemed to focus not just on his face but on the space around him, as if she were watching his thoughts take shape. Her name, translated into human language, was Scifi. She was the Coalition's liaison for emerging species, which meant she was trained to observe, guide, and when necessary, limit. "They help me think," Jonah said. "Hard not to look." She tilted her head slightly. "Humans say that often. You look outward when your minds are busy." "We look outward when we're curious," Jonah replied before he could stop himself. Something flickered in her expression. Interest maybe, or concern. "Curiosity," she repeated, tasting the word. "Yes, that is what I wish to discuss." She leaned in a little too close. Close enough that Jonah could see the fine patterns along her skin, shifting slowly, responding to her internal state. Close enough that his training told him this was deliberate. "Stop pretending you're not curious," she said softly. Jonah felt a small smile tug at his mouth. "I'm not pretending," he said. "I just don't hide it very well." "That is precisely the problem," Scifi replied. She straightened and gestured toward a quieter section of the chamber. Jonah followed, aware of a few glances from other delegates. Humans still drew attention just by existing. They were loud without sound, restless without movement. They stopped near a low table that adjusted itself to their heights. A soft field formed around them, muting outside noise. Privacy, Coalition style. "You have been reviewing restricted data," Scifi said, her tone calm. Jonah nodded. "I had clearance." "You had partial clearance." It was enough to see that something didn't add up. Her eyes narrowed slightly, and instead of stopping, you continued. "Yes. Why?" Jonah hesitated. He had been asked this question many times in his life by teachers, supervisors, even friends. The answer never seemed to satisfy anyone. "Because there was a gap," he said finally, "and gaps bother us." Scifi studied him in silence. Around them, the station continued its quiet rhythm, unaware of the weight of the moment. "Do you know," she said slowly, "that most species in the Coalition consider unanswered questions to be a sign of wisdom?" Jonah blinked. "That seems backwards." "To you," she said. "Not to us. An unanswered question marks a boundary, a place where knowledge ends and safety begins." Jonah leaned back slightly, careful not to break the invisible rules of distance again. "Where we come from," he said, "unanswered questions are invitations." "Yes," Scifi said, "we have noticed." She tapped the surface of the table, and a faint projection appeared between them. Symbols and diagrams shifted, forming patterns Jonah recognized from his late-night reviews. Humanity has been mapping anomalies, she continued. Patterns in physics, inconsistencies in long-established models. You do this not because you were instructed to, but because you are uncomfortable leaving them alone. Jonah's eyes lit up despite himself. They're beautiful, aren't they? Like the universe is hinting at something just out of reach. Salathi's patterns darkened. That is one way to describe them. Another delegate passed nearby, pausing just long enough to glance at the projection before moving on more quickly than necessary. Those anomalies, Salathi said, are not new. Other civilizations noticed them long ago. Jonah frowned. Then why aren't they documented? Why are they classified as theoretical noise? Because, she said, they lead to questions that destabilize societies. Jonah felt a familiar thrill mixed with unease. Destabilize how? She looked away toward the stars. In every recorded case, civilizations that pursued those questions too far experienced collapse, not through war or disaster but through conceptual failure. He waited, sensing this was not a time to interrupt. They reached points where their understanding of reality could no longer support itself, Salathi continued. Their models contradicted their experiences. Their assumptions unraveled. They did not die. They simply stopped progressing, stopped choosing, stopped expanding. Jonah absorbed this, his mind racing. So you decided to stop asking. We decided to stop encouraging, she corrected. Curiosity was redirected inward, then slowed, then ritualized. Knowledge became stable. And stagnant, Jonah said quietly. Salathi turned back to him sharply. Stable, she repeated. Jonah met her gaze. From a human perspective, those are very close to the same thing. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The projection faded, leaving only the soft glow of the station lights. You see, Salathi said at last, even now, even knowing the cost, you lean forward. Jonah laughed softly. I guess we're bad at leaning back. That is why you concern us, she said. And why you fascinate us. She reached out, her fingers hovering just above the table. Another projection appeared, smaller this time, a sealed archive marker, old and heavily coded. This, she said, is not accessible to most coalition members. It contains records of what happens beyond the boundary. Jonah's breath caught. Then why are you showing it to me? Because, Salathi said, you already know it exists, and because humans do not respond well to being told not to look. That's true, Jonah admitted. We usually look harder. Yes, her eyes softened just slightly. What you may not understand is that curiosity is not merely a habit. For your species, it appears to be a survival trait. Jonah thought of Earth. Of storms and shifting continents, of predators and plagues, of centuries spent not knowing if tomorrow would be better or worse. We didn't have the option to stop asking, he said. Not if we wanted to live. Salathi considered this. Most species evolved in stable environments, predictable cycles, limited threats. Curiosity beyond necessity was inefficient. Lucky you, Jonah said. She almost smiled. There is debate within the coalition, Salathi continued. Some believe humanity should be guided away from these questions. Others believe you should be restricted. And you? Jonah asked. She leaned in again, close enough that the air between them seemed charged. I believe you will ask regardless. Jonah felt the weight of that statement settle on him. So what happens now? Now, she said, we observe what you do next. She withdrew her hand and the archive marker vanished. Jonah exhaled slowly. You're letting us choose. For now, he nodded. That's fair. Salathi studied him one last time. Be careful, Jonah Hale. Some doors are not closed out of cruelty but out of caution. He smiled, gentle and earnest. We know, we just have trouble leaving doors unopened. As she walked away, Jonah turned back to the stars. His reflection stared back at him, small against the endless dark. Somewhere beyond what was known, questions waited, patient and inviting. And humanity, as always, was already leaning forward. The days after the meeting did not feel different at first. The station still moved in its quiet rhythm. Delegates still followed their paths, speaking in calm tones, avoiding sharp gestures. Yet for Jonah Hale, something had shifted. A question had been placed in front of him and then deliberately left unanswered, like a door left slightly open. He noticed changes in small things. Data access requests that once took minutes now took hours. Some files arrived with sections blurred or missing, as if someone wanted him to see the shape of the truth but not its details. Other humans noticed it too. They did not speak openly about it, but glances lingered longer. Conversations paused mid-sentence when non-humans approached. Human curiosity did not disappear when it was watched. It adapted. Jonah met with the other human analysts in a shared workspace overlooking the inner ring of the station. The room was simple, designed to reduce distraction, but humans had filled it with quiet movement. Screens glowed with star maps, equations, cultural models. Someone had added a small plant from Earth, growing under artificial light. Mara Lynn sat cross-legged on her chair, scrolling through a projection with quick, precise movements. She looked up as Jonah entered. "They're tightening things," she said without greeting. Jonah nodded. "I noticed. They think slowing us down will help," said Tomas Reed, leaning back with his arms folded. "They don't get that slowing us just gives us more time to think." A few soft laughs followed, not mocking, just honest. Mara tilted her head. "Salathi spoke to you directly, didn't she?" "Yes." "What did she say?" Jonah hesitated. He chose his words carefully. "That curiosity scares them, and that we've already gone too far." Silence settled over the group, not fear but focus. "Too far where?" Tomas asked. "That's the problem," Jonah replied. "They don't say, they just draw a line and hope we won't step over it." Mara's eyes brightened. "Which means there's something worth seeing on the other side." Jonah smiled despite himself. "Exactly." Across the station, Salathi watched humanity from a distance. Not through cameras or sensors alone, but through patterns. Increased collaboration. Sharper questions phrased in softer language. Humans were not pushing openly. They were circling, mapping the edges of what was allowed. She met with other coalition members in chambers designed to accommodate vastly different forms of life. Light bent strangely here, shaped by preferences older than human history. "They are accelerating," said one delegate, a being of layered crystal and sound. "Your intervention failed." "It delayed," Salathi replied calmly, "which is more than we expected." "Delay may be enough," said another. "Curiosity burns itself out when it meets resistance." Salathi did not answer immediately. She remembered Jonah's expression when he spoke of unanswered questions, not frustration, invitation. "Humans do not burn out easily," she said. "They redirect." The crystal delegate pulsed in irritation. "Then restrict them further." "And confirm their suspicions?" Salathi asked. "That would only sharpen their focus." There was a pause. Among the coalition, silence often meant reconsideration. "What do you propose?" the delegate asked at last. Salathi's patterns shifted thoughtfully. "We observe closely. And we test. Test. Yes, we give them a controlled truth, something incomplete, we see how they respond." Back in the human workspace, Jonah stared at a projection that refused to leave his mind. The anomalies were subtle, easy to dismiss. Tiny inconsistencies in physical constants across vast distances. Slight delays where there should be none. Gaps that felt intentional, like punctuation in a sentence not yet finished. He pulled up older coalition research, looking for patterns in what had been studied and what had been ignored. Entire centuries of work existed, but certain questions simply vanished after being raised once. "That's strange," he murmured. Mara leaned over his shoulder. "What is?" "Every species seems to stop asking the same kinds of questions, independently, as if they all reach the same conclusion." "Or were guided to it," she said. Jonah nodded. "Or warned." A soft chime interrupted them. An incoming message, marked with Salatha's authorization code. Jonah opened it. It contained data. Not raw, not clean, but enough to set his thoughts racing. A partial model of reality that bent in ways human mathematics could describe but not fully explain. Mara whistled softly. "They're feeding us, testing us," Jonah said. "What do they expect us to do?" Jonah studied the data. The strange thing was not that it was complex. Humans loved complexity. The strange thing was that it was incomplete in a very specific way. "They expect us to stop," he said slowly, "to see the instability and decide it's not worth it." Mara crossed her arms. "And will we?" Jonah thought of Selath's warning, of civilizations that had chosen safety over understanding. "No," he said, "we'll build around it." They worked for days, then weeks. Humans from different fields collaborated in ways that confused their hosts. Physicists spoke with artists. Engineers consulted philosophers. They did not treat the gaps as failures but as features, places to be careful, places to slow down without stopping. Selathi observed the results with growing unease. "They are not destabilizing," she reported to the council. "They are compensating." "How?" asked the crystal delegate. "They accept uncertainty as part of the model," Selathi said. "They do not require completeness to function. That is irrational." "It is human," Selathi replied. In private, she replayed recordings of human discussions. They spoke openly about not knowing. They joked about paradox. They built safeguards not to eliminate risk but to live alongside it. Curiosity, she realized, did not consume them. It grounded them. Jonah stood once more at the observation panel, staring into the stars. Selathi approached, stopping at a respectful distance this time. "You saw what we did," he said without turning. "Yes, and you surprised us," she admitted. He smiled faintly. "We get that a lot." "You do not collapse when faced with contradiction," she said. "You reorganize." Jonah turned to face her. "Reality's messy. We grew up in it." She studied him, something like wonder crossing her features. "If we allow you to continue, there may be consequences we cannot predict." "There always are," Jonah said gently. "The difference is whether we face them blind or prepared." Selathi looked back at the stars. Long ago, her people had made a choice to stop leaning forward, to survive by standing still. Now, watching humanity, she wondered if survival could mean something else entirely. The archive marker flickered briefly in her thoughts. And for the first time in a very long age, the coalition considered what might lie beyond the boundary, not with fear but with cautious, growing curiosity. The controlled truth did not stay controlled for long. At first, it appeared harmless. Just a few more shared files. Slightly wider access windows. Small permissions granted and then quietly watched. The coalition believed they were still holding the leash. What they did not understand was that humans did not pull against limits in a straight line. They learned the shape of the leash, then walked in circles until they understood the hand holding it. Jonah Hale spent most of his time sleeping in short bursts. His mind refused to slow down, not from fear, but from connection. Ideas linked to other ideas, forming networks that felt alive. When one model failed, it did not feel like an end. It felt like information. He sat in the human workspace, surrounded by soft light and quiet voices. A large shared projection hovered in the center of the room, showing layers of reality models stacked on top of one another. None of them matched perfectly. All of them worked well enough. "That shouldn't be stable," Tomas said, pointing to a section where probabilities folded back on themselves. Jonah nodded. "It is, not alone. But when you let it fluctuate within limits," Mara added, "it holds, like a bridge that sways instead of snapping." They all stared at the projection. The coalition models had always aimed for perfection. No gaps, no contradictions. Humans were doing the opposite. They were leaving room for error on purpose. "This is why they stopped," Tomas said quietly. "They wanted certainty." "And certainty broke them," Jonah replied. Elsewhere on the station, Selathi stood before a council that was growing uneasy. Reports filled the air, layered with color and sound. "They have reached the second threshold," said the crystal delegate. "They are modeling restricted domains. They are not accessing them directly," Scifi said. "They are inferring." "That distinction is meaningless," another delegate replied. "Inference leads to understanding, and understanding leads to collapse," said the crystal being. "We have seen this." Scifi did not deny it. She had seen the records herself, civilizations that had reached too far too fast, minds that fractured under the weight of truths that contradicted everything they were built upon. But the humans were different. "They are not trying to hold the entire truth at once," Scifi said. "They distribute it across people, across systems. No single mind carries the full burden." "That only delays failure," the council replied. "Or prevents it," Scifi said. The chamber fell silent. For the first time in many cycles, the council authorized a deeper release. Not full access, but something close. A fragment of the archive that had not been opened since before humanity learned to shape metal. The fragment reached Jonah late in the station's artificial night. His screen lit up softly, and he felt the familiar mix of excitement and caution settle in his chest. "This is it," Mara whispered, reading over his shoulder. "This is the edge." The data did not describe a monster or a weapon. It described a rule, or rather the lack of one. Reality at its deepest level was not fixed. It responded to observation, expectation, and interpretation more strongly than any coalition science had admitted. Not in simple ways, not like old human theories, but subtly, constantly. The universe was not breaking when civilizations asked too much of it. It was changing. "That's why they stopped," Tomas said slowly. "Not because it collapses, because it stops being predictable." "And predictability is their safety," Jonah said. They worked carefully. Slower than before, double-checking not just equations but emotional responses. Humans talked openly about when something felt overwhelming. That alone confused the coalition observers. Feelings were not usually part of advanced research reports. Scifi watched the recordings late into her rest cycle. Humans arguing, laughing, pausing when someone looked tired. No panic, no obsession, just steady progress. "They are regulating themselves," she murmured. The realization unsettled her more than any collapse record ever had. Jonah began to notice changes in himself. Not fear, but awareness. The universe felt closer somehow, less like a distant machine and more like a conversation. He did not feel smaller for it. He felt connected. One evening, as artificial starlight dimmed, Scifi approached him again at the observation panel. "You have seen it," she said. "Yes," Jonah replied, "at least part of it. And you still continue." "Yes." "Why?" she asked. "Knowing that reality itself may respond to your understanding," Jonah thought for a long moment. "Because it always has," he said. "We just didn't have words for it before." She studied him closely. "Do you not fear changing something fundamental?" "We fear not understanding what we're already changing," Jonah said. That answer stayed with her long after she left. The council met again. Voices overlapped in sharp patterns. "They are altering probability fields," one delegate said. "Minor but measurable." "They do it unconsciously," another added, "by expecting flexibility." "This cannot continue," the crystal delegate said. "We must close the archive." Scifi stood, her posture firm. "If we do, they will still proceed. Blind this time, that is far more dangerous." "Then what do you suggest?" the council demanded. Scifi took a breath. "We acknowledge the truth we have been avoiding." Silence. "That reality is not fragile," she continued. "Our understanding of it was." The words felt heavy, ancient, and necessary. Back among the humans, the models reached a new stage. They did not explain everything. They explained enough. The universe was not a rigid structure to be solved. It was a system that rewarded adaptability. Civilizations that demanded certainty broke themselves trying to hold it. Humans, shaped by unstable worlds and changing rules, had learned to live without solid ground. "This isn't dominance," Mara said, staring at the projection. It's partnership, Jonah nodded. With the unknown, a message arrived, coalition-wide, rare, unfiltered. Salatha's voice carried through the station. Human representatives, she said, the council requests your presence, all of you. The chamber was fuller than Jonah had ever seen it. Delegates shimmered, glowed, resonated. Tension filled the air, thick but restrained. You have crossed a line, the crystal delegate said. One we believed absolute. Jonah stepped forward. His voice was calm. We didn't cross it. We built a bridge next to it. Murmurs spread. You risk altering the foundation of existence, another delegate said. Jonah nodded. So did you, when you chose not to look. Salathi watched closely as the council absorbed this. Humans were not accusing. They were offering context. We are not asking you to follow us, Jonah continued. Only to stop standing in our way. Let us explore, carefully, together or alone, but we will explore. The council withdrew to deliberate. Time stretched. When they returned, Salathi spoke. The coalition will not stop you, she said, nor will we guide you further. Jonah accepted this. That's enough. As the chamber slowly emptied, Salathi remained behind. You understand what this means, she said quietly. You will stand at the edge of what we fear. Jonah smiled, not proudly but gently. Someone has to. She leaned closer, not in warning this time, but in shared understanding. For the first time in the long history of the coalition, the unknown was no longer something to be avoided. It had become a responsibility. And humanity had accepted it without hesitation. The decision did not end the tension. It changed its shape. After the council stepped back, the station felt different. Not quieter, but more alert, as if every wall and corridor were listening. The coalition no longer blocked humanity's path, yet they did not walk alongside them either. Humans were given space, and space, Jonah knew, was never empty. A new wing of the station was assigned to human research. It was larger than expected, with flexible structures that shifted to human needs faster than coalition systems usually allowed. The message was clear without being spoken. If humanity was going to move forward, they would do so here, contained, observed, but not restrained. Jonah stood at the entrance the first time it opened, watching doors fold into the walls like cautious gestures. Behind him, other humans gathered. Scientists, engineers, thinkers, and a few people whose job titles never quite explained what they actually did. This feels like trust, Tomas said. It feels like distance, Mara replied. Jonah nodded. Sometimes they're the same thing. Inside, the space responded quickly. Surfaces changed texture for comfort. Light adjusted to human eyes. Systems waited for input instead of assuming needs. It was subtle, but it mattered. Humans noticed. They began working immediately, not rushing but not hesitating either. The models grew more complex, yet also more stable. Where earlier versions had been fragile, these adapted. They bent without breaking. They changed without losing function. One concept became central to everything. No single answer was final. Instead of locking conclusions in place, humans built layers of understanding. Each layer could be replaced without collapsing the rest. This idea confused coalition observers deeply. Knowledge to them was something to preserve unchanged. To humans, knowledge was something to use. Salathi visited often, sometimes standing quietly, sometimes asking questions she already suspected the answers to. She noticed how humans moved around uncertainty like experienced travelers. They slowed when needed. They warned each other. They laughed when things surprised them. You are not afraid, she said one day, watching Jonah adjust a projection. We are, Jonah replied. We just don't let fear decide for us. That is unusual, Salathi said. Fear kept us alive, Jonah said, but curiosity taught us how to live with it. Beyond the station, word spread through the coalition. Humanity was no longer just an emerging species. They were becoming something else, a reference point, a question with no easy label. Some civilizations withdrew further, reinforcing old boundaries. Others leaned closer, quietly sending observers, pretending not to watch too closely. The universe responded too, in ways small but undeniable. Systems near the station showed subtle shifts, probabilities adjusted. Outcomes changed just enough to notice, not enough to panic. Humans noticed. Instead of celebrating, they paused. "We need rules," Mara said during one long session. "Not imposed ones, self-made ones." "Limits," Tomas added. "Guidelines," Jonah corrected. "Limits break, guidelines adapt." They began drafting what they called curiosity protocols, not laws but shared agreements. When to stop, when to step back, when to ask for help, when to admit something was too much. This, more than anything else, unsettled the coalition. "They are placing boundaries on themselves," one delegate reported. "Voluntarily." "Why?" asked another. "Because they know they can go further," Salathi answered. The council debated again, but with less certainty than before. They had always believed that restraint required authority. Humanity was proving that restraint could also come from awareness. One cycle, a problem emerged. A model predicted a change that should not have been possible, not dangerous but unexpected. If correct, it meant that understanding could reshape certain constants slowly, gently. Jonah stared at the data for a long time. "We stop," he said. Mara looked at him sharply. "Why?" "Because we don't understand the side effects yet," Jonah replied, "and because we don't need to prove anything." That decision echoed through the station. Salathi felt something unfamiliar when she learned of it: relief. She met Jonah again by the observation panel, the stars bright and steady beyond the glass. "You chose not to proceed," she said. "Yes." "Even though you could have." "Yes." She watched his reflection in the glass. "This is why the council fears you," she said quietly. "And why I no longer do." Jonah smiled faintly. "We're not here to break things. We're here to understand them without breaking ourselves." The coalition began to change slowly. Not all at once, not loudly. Some species sent delegates to learn human methods. Others asked careful questions they had avoided for ages. Humanity did not lead with authority. They shared tools, habits, ways of thinking. They did not claim answers. They offered processes. Curiosity was no longer seen as a spark that burned out of control. It was becoming something steadier, a light that could be dimmed or brightened as needed. One day, Salathi stood before the council again. "Humanity has accepted a role without being asked," she said. "They explore where we hesitate. They stop where we cannot." The crystal delegate pulsed thoughtfully. "They stand between us and the unknown." "Yes," Salathi said, "not as a shield, as a guide." There was resistance, there always was, but there was also something new, hope, cautious and unfamiliar. Back in the human wing, Jonah watched a new generation of researchers arrive. Younger, eager, but trained from the start to respect uncertainty. He realized then that humanity was not just exploring the unknown. They were learning how to live next to it. And the universe, flexible and listening, seemed to lean just a little closer in return. Time changed meaning after that. Years passed on the station, though no one could say exactly how many. Human calendars tried to keep up, but even they bent under the slow, steady shift in how reality behaved near the place where curiosity had been given room to breathe. The station was still there, still whole, still calm, but it felt older in a quiet way, like a place that had seen many careful choices. Jonah Hale was older too, not tired, not worn down, but shaped. Lines had formed at the corners of his eyes, earned from long hours of thought and quiet laughter. He no longer rushed to the observation panel every day, yet when he did, the stars still held him. Humanity's role had become clear without ever being written into law. When something unknown appeared, when a question made others hesitate, humans were called. Not as heroes, not as rulers, as listeners. They had learned something important over the years. Curiosity was not about speed, it was about direction. The human wing of the station had grown into something like a small city, open spaces for discussion, quiet rooms for rest, areas designed not for answers but for thinking. Other species visited often now. Some came openly. Others came quietly, standing at the edges, watching humans work with care instead of hunger. Selathi walked through the wing one cycle, her steps unhurried. She no longer felt like an observer here. She felt like a guest. Humans greeted her warmly, without formality, without fear. She found Jonah seated near a wide table, helping a group of younger researchers review a model. He listened more than he spoke now. When he did speak, it was to ask questions that helped others see more clearly. The group dispersed and Selathi approached. "You no longer stand at the edge alone," she said. Jonah smiled. "That was never the goal." They walked together toward the observation panel. The stars beyond looked the same as ever, yet Selathi knew better now. The universe was not fixed, it was responsive. It listened in its own way. "The coalition is changing," she said. "Slowly but truly," Jonah nodded. "Change works better that way." "Some still fear that humanity will go too far," Selathi continued. Jonah considered this. "We might," he said honestly, "but if we do, it won't be because we didn't care. It will be because we believed understanding was worth the risk." "That is what frightens them," Selathi said. "And what frightens us," Jonah replied. "That's why we're careful." A signal echoed softly through the station. A new anomaly had been detected far from the station's influence. Something unusual, not dangerous, but strange enough to draw attention. The coalition hesitated. Humans did not rush. They gathered. They discussed. They listened to those who felt uneasy. They asked who should go and who should stay behind. In the end, a small human-led team was chosen, joined by representatives from several other species who had never volunteered for such work before. Selathi watched them depart with a feeling she had never expected to feel. Trust, not blind trust, not desperate hope, something steadier. Jonah did not go with them. That surprised some people. He had once been at the center of everything. Now he stood slightly to the side, guiding without pulling. Mara took his place at the front, calm and focused. Tomas stood beside her, steady as ever. Others followed, carrying not just tools but habits of thought shaped by years of living with uncertainty. The mission unfolded slowly. Data returned in careful streams. The anomaly responded not dramatically but gently, as if acknowledging being noticed. The universe did not resist. It adapted. The coalition watched, breath held in ways they did not have words for. No collapse came, no loss of meaning. Only a deeper sense that reality was larger than they had allowed themselves to believe. When the team returned, tired but whole, the station felt different again. Not louder, not brighter, just open. The council called one final gathering. Not to decide humanity's fate. That had already been done by actions, not votes. Selathi spoke. "We once believed that stopping questions kept us safe," she said. "We were wrong. Safety without understanding was only comfort." She turned slightly, gesturing toward the humans present. They did not conquer the unknown. They learned how to walk beside it. No objections followed. No fear-filled protests. Just quiet agreement. Later, Jonah stood alone at the observation panel. The stars were familiar now and yet always new. Selathi joined him, standing not too close, not too far. "You were right," she said softly. "Curiosity was never the danger," Jonah smiled. "Avoiding it was." She looked at him with something like gratitude. "What will humanity do now?" he thought for a moment. "What we've always done," he said. "Ask, listen, adjust, and stop when stopping matters." The universe beyond the glass did not answer in words. It did not need to. It was enough that someone was willing to look, not to control, but to understand. And humanity, shaped by storms and questions and fragile hope, leaned forward just enough, no more, no less, and found that the unknown was not something to fear. It was something to share.